Welcome to ASA Central Line, the official podcast series of the American Society of Anesthesiologists, edited by Dr. Adam Stryker.
Welcome to Central Line. I'm Brooke Trainer, your host, and today we're going to go behind the scenes with two anesthesiologists who are doing something many of us think about, some of us avoid, and a few people do it exceptionally well. So using social media to explain medicine, anesthesiologists, and the work that we do every day. I'm joined by Dr. Zain Hassan and Dr. Max Feinstein. They are both anesthesiologists and educators in their own way, and both have built a large online audience presence, but they've done it through very different styles and platforms. Zain has become known for simplifying medicine for a broad public audience, especially through his short form content that tackles medical news, anesthesia questions, healthcare costs, things that patients are already asking online. And Max is a pediatric cardiac anesthesiologist and educational YouTube creator who helps work with patients, trainees, and clinicians to better understand anesthesiology, patient safety, and what actually happens before, during, and after anesthesia care. So today we're going to talk about the content creation, the credibility and misinformation of the industry out there, some patient trust, the realities of making this work while practicing medicine, and what anesthesiologists can learn from both of them. So, Zain and Max, thank you both for being here. To start, I'd like for each of you just to introduce yourselves, and I'm going to give you two parts to that introduction. So first, I'd like for you to tell the audience about your clinical life, so where you practice, what kind of anesthesia you do, mainly what your day-to-day work looks like, but then also tell us about your online life, your brand, your audience, and what people come to you for. So I'll start with you, Dr. Hassan.
Yeah, so I'm Dr. Zain Hassan. I like to joke and comically say I'm a board certified trauma anesthesiologist, and everybody listening to this podcast knows there's no such formal training as trauma anesthesiologist. But like you will probably learn in the duration of this podcast, building your brand is very important. And I myself have been a general anesthesiologist, but I really especially love trauma. I was in Minneapolis during some of the riots and during the George Floyd incident, and it was chaos, but it was fun in the sense that I got to use all my medical knowledge and anesthesia knowledge. And so the idea of a trauma anesthesiologist kind of snuck onto that. I work right now in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but relocating back out to Los Angeles because life is better where it's sunnier. And aside from that, my day-to-day is teaching residents, working with CRNAs, working solo. I do hands-on practice, do supervision practice, all sorts of blended anesthesia care, as they say. And I enjoy every aspect of it, and I can't wait to dive into it with you guys.
And Dr. Feinstein.
So my name is Max Feinstein, and as you said, I'm a peds cardiac anesthesiologist, and I'm in the middle of a transition right now from practice in New York to living in Philadelphia and working in Delaware. So I'm slowly making my way towards warmer climate. And I, same as you, Zain, really enjoy working with trainees and being in the operating room in a really hands-on way. And that passion for education is also present in what I do online. So my YouTube channel is primarily based on videos that explain what we do as anesthesiologists. And I try to cater to two audiences, both medical trainees, especially those who are early on in their practice, because I feel like in many institutions in the United States and elsewhere, medical students just don't get a lot of exposure to anesthesiology. So it's great to be able to speak to that audience. And it was really just by chance that I happened to stumble upon anesthesiology when I was a medical student. So I really enjoy being able to share that with anyone who's interested. And then there are many patients who either have an interest in what we do or have an upcoming procedure that involves anesthesia and don't necessarily have the opportunity to speak with an anesthesia professional to learn more about what it is that they can expect. So there is, from what I can tell, a really big need for that. And so I try to cater to patients as well who are looking for more information about what they can expect when they meet their anesthesiologist.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you both have very different approaches to social media. I'd love for you to share with the audience how each of you got involved in social media and specifically how you landed, where you landed on the channels you landed on and your focus. So maybe I'll kick this back to you, Max, just to follow up. How did you get where you are on social media?
I don't encourage anyone to do this, but if you happen to look back through my videos on YouTube and you find some of the original ones that I made, it's very clear that I do not have a background in video production or public speaking. So my angle coming into making videos and putting them on social media was really opened up, unfortunately, during COVID, where the clinical schedule that I had as an intern gave me quite a bit of flexibility in terms of time. And this was also in New York. There was nothing to do outside of work except for watch stuff on TV and Netflix and so forth. And so I thought there was a real opportunity to start making videos, put them on YouTube. And as I mentioned, I really wanted to try to reach an audience of medical students to help them understand what it is that I was getting ready to start, because at that point I hadn't even started my formal anesthesia residency. And so I thought that having a YouTube channel would be a great way to document what that process looked like and hopefully share some educational material along the way. So I just sat down with my phone and pressed record on my couch at home and I went from there.
That's awesome. And what about you, Dr. Hassan? How did you land in social media?
Yeah, similar to Max's story, I kind of fell into it during COVID when you had some more time on your hands. But the approach that I took was a little bit different. I was a finance major in undergraduate, so I kind of understood business a little bit. And I was always interested in finance, stocks, economies, how the hospital administrations work, what insurance companies charge, and why people are getting such large bills at the end of the day. And so I kind of fell into it when I first took it on with the GLPs, probably a year and a half before it went mainstream. I fell into talking about this new medication that a lot of my patients were telling me that you can lose weight without going to the gym. And I thought that was insane myself. So I shared that. And once I started doing that and a lot of patients responded and people responded with questions, I really got into it. And similar to Max, when I first started on the short form video content, I do some YouTube, but not as well as Max does it. When I fell into that, there's a different way of approaching short form versus long form, and there's a lot more attention grabbing and getting to the point very quickly and ending it on some sort of call to action. And there's a different format to it. And it took me a little bit of time before I kind of understood it properly. But once I did, the ability to reach so many people and talk about issues that everybody's thinking about. I mean, you guys know it when you walk through the operating rooms, you talk to surgeons, you talk to nurses, and you talk to patients and you talk about how much everything costs. Like a bottle of Tylenol is $35 in the operating room when it's 30 cents at the store. And it's how does it get to 10x, 100x the cost? And those are very interesting problems to me. And the approach that I kind of took was, hey, let me just make sure I'm down the middle. I'm not leaning one way or another. I try to be fair in all accounts when I talk about any sort of policies that come across. And it was actually very interesting to me. And so as I did it, I received a lot of positive feedback. And I hope I get this a lot, but I hope I inspired people to get on to social media, because there was a dearth of healthcare providers on any social media platform even 3 years ago. And now it seems like a lot more doctors are taking their passion into their own hands almost and helping as many people as they can, while also showing there's a human side to being a doctor. We go through the same trials and tribulations that everybody goes through, but we also have this privilege to take care of patients and help people. And how you blend the two is not necessarily easily conveyed to the general public. And so I enjoyed that aspect of it, and I enjoy the perks that come along with it too, but also the ability to get so many messages all the time by patients, people telling me thank you or saying, hey, you pointed this out. I asked my doctor about it and they started me on this medication, and all those kind of things they're gratifying, honestly. So that's kind of how I fell into it, and it keeps the fire going.
So I personally am impressed with how you do this. How do you simplify without oversimplifying? Like, is there a style or preparation or something that you're thinking about when you're planning these?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I try to do is find, what the stories are that are trending through social media, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with health. It can be like the United Health incident or the vaccine incident or whatever it is. I try to find out what the issue is, and then I try to go on social media and read both sides of every argument, whether it's, hey, I'm against this completely or I'm for this completely. And then I try to find, hey, what are the commonalities? And from there, I kind of produce my video. So I don't necessarily approach it with, hey, this is right or this is wrong. Now, of course, there are instances where things happen and it's clear to everybody and 99% of people agree that it's right or wrong. But a lot of the nuance comes in those issues that there's, really strong views on both sides. And it's very tough, especially being clinicians. And we know what we feel, but it's very tough to hear what the other side is saying and try to bring both sides together. And I find a lot of joy in that, honestly. My following is made up of all sorts of people, patients, doctors, physicians, business people. And it's very interesting to me, the questions and the conversations that I get into. So that kind of keeps my fire going. But as you asked, Brooke, I kind of try to understand whatever the issue is from both sides and then come up with my opinion or my video based on that.
Yeah, that's great. And for Max, I'm going to ask, your style is long content. So would you share what your goal is and what you're hoping to achieve through that content? And do you feel like this is the right mechanism of doing that? Are you interested in trying other venues or formats for what you're doing?
If you ask my wife how long it takes me to just convey my own thoughts, just me being a Midwesterner, I tend to speak a little more slowly and I like to take my time when I'm communicating really anything. So I think naturally a long form video was just well suited to how I wanted to convey information to people on social media. But from a more serious standpoint, it does give me the opportunity to explore topics in a pretty significant amount of detail that I would be limited by if I were doing short form content. And given that a lot of the topics that I enjoy covering, oftentimes, in my opinion, require having a nuanced discussion about a drug mechanism or an adverse reaction and so forth, I think that a longer period of time is often merited for what it is that I choose to talk about. One of the interesting topics that comes up when I'm either collaborating with someone or just thinking about how I want to make my videos on my own is what the relationship is between the length of the content and what the audience's attention span looks like. And I think that we actually, as a society, give ourselves a little bit of short shrift for just imagining that everyone has a really short attention span, because what I have found is that even long form videos that I make, as long as people are interested in the material and it's conveyed in a way that is not going to put someone to sleep, that people do tend to watch long videos regardless of how long that is. So when I'm doing collaborations with someone and I say, this video that we're going to put together might end up being 30 minutes, and they say, I don't know that anyone's necessarily going to watch something that long, my response is, well, if we convey interesting material in a way that is going to be helpful for the viewers, I think you'd be surprised how interested people are in the material. And I will just say, as an aside, I have dabbled a little bit in short form content. I didn't particularly enjoy it, and I think that was reflected by the fact that those videos just didn't end up getting a lot of traction. But interestingly, someone had pirated my long form videos, chopped them up into sped up small videos and put them on TikTok, and got a following of like 20,000 people. And I happened across it one day because someone who I worked with was like, oh, I saw your videos on TikTok. And I said, no, you didn't. They said, yeah, it's right here, man. And they pulled up my TikTok, and well, it wasn't my TikTok, but I was there. It was a pretty funny,
And how do you
alarming
feel about
experience.
that? I mean, is that frustrating for you to see someone else like capitalizing off of the work that you're doing?
It was. Yes, absolutely. I mean, it was content theft. I reported them, and to their credit, TikTok actually shut down the account. And
Yeah, that's surprising.
I do check periodically to see if I show up on TikTok, but I haven't yet. But I know that Glockenflecken's YouTube channel, for example, was originally a pirate YouTube channel. Someone had been stealing his material and had amassed tens of thousands of followers. And then he went through a process to get that shut down and started his own YouTube channel. So
Okay.
I think, unfortunately, that's not an uncommon experience for people who are making content on social media.
That makes sense. So let's go back. Zane, I'm going to toss this back to you to the beginning. what was the first moment where you thought, I should post this, I should talk about this, maybe people will actually find this helpful?
Well, I try to pride myself in being ahead of the curve when it comes to what's the public is going to be talking about, whether it's in healthcare or in life in general. And my first example with it was the GLP ones, and with my patient encounters and how I was flabbergasted that a medication could cause you to lose weight without going to the gym. I didn't even think it was possible at the time. And I posted the 2 or 3 videos on it because I was so shocked that these medications actually existed and they actually worked. And then I think 6 months or 9 months later, the Kim Kardashian article came out, and Ozempic never looked back from there. And so I figured out I had a knack for it. And at every almost iteration of that, there was always one flashpoint issue. And whether it was the United Health thing, the vaccine issue, there's always a flashpoint issue, it seems like every 6 months in healthcare. And now going forward, I've been talking about artificial intelligence the way that I see it, in the next few years. And I really figured out that internally, I found some joy in almost bringing topics to physicians and patients that I think is going to be influential in the future for their healthcare. And that's how I figured out almost that I derived that I had a knack for this, because not a lot of doctors out there are willing to go out on a limb and talk about, social issues or politics or any of those kind of things. And now you see it all the time, but 3 years ago, it was almost taboo to speak about any of these things. And now it's every doctor's giving their opinion. And I'm happy to be a part of that process. And for anybody that I've inspired, I'm happy for that. And anybody who's taken derivatives of my work, like Max said, I'm open to that, always open to criticism. I've had some amazing conversations with other physicians that aren't anesthesiologists that corrected some of my work. And I went back and corrected my work afterwards because they said, hey, the study that you pointed out, it had this number of participants and that's not enough. And I look back and I'm like, you're right, I need to take that down. And so I thoroughly enjoyed the educational process for myself also to become a better auditor of research, but also just the ability to communicate to all facets of humanity is just exciting. And that's what kind of solidified the knack that I had.
Yeah. And Max, was there a specific video or topic that kind of changed that trajectory for you too?
Absolutely. I had just in retrospect, a really funny experience starting, which was I was making these videos, like I said, sitting on my couch. They were pretty unengaging, frankly, but they were on topics that I thought might be helpful for medical students. At that point, that was the sole audience that I was trying to speak to. And a few months after I got started, I made a video where I was basically just trying to document, as I said, what I was learning in residency. And so one of the first videos that I made that took place in an operating room with permission, talking about doing things above board, I made sure that I had hospital permission. And for anyone who wants to do any type of work on social media where they're filming in a hospital, it's extremely important to make sure that you are following institutional guidelines and that you've spoken with your chair or whoever your direct boss is to make sure that it's okay. So an important aside that I would just plant out there as long as we're talking about it. So I was in the hospital and I was filming in an empty room, just what the process of setting up an operating room looked like. And I was just using the classic mnemonic MS Maids and made a video, put it online. Like most of my videos, it was getting 20 or 30 views a day, which I thought was great because I hoped to reach people who might need that information. And for me, that was plenty. I derived a lot of meaning from that. And I remember being on rounds. I was on an ICU rotation, and I happened to sort of check and see what was going on. And all of a sudden, that video got 1,000 views in a day. And the next day, it got 3,000 views. And the next day, it got 5,000 views. And I was shocked because I couldn't, for the life of me, figure out who is watching this video. There are not that many trainees in anesthesiology who need to know this information. And so that was the point for me where I realized that there are a lot of patients who want to have a better understanding of what goes on in the operating room, including what we do. And so that opened up a new avenue for me to make more patient-facing content.
That's cool. I'm just curious, at what point did you finally tell your colleagues that you were doing this? Or did they all find out later on their own?
Yeah, I mean, I candidly will say that it did feel embarrassing to start making these videos, but like I said, it was something that I was passionate about and I felt like it was a good educational tool. So I was happy to just plow through the embarrassment that I felt about it. I didn't really say anything to any of my colleagues except on the rare occasions that I would be filming in an empty operating room at night or on the weekend, and someone would walk in to grab, a bag of normal saline or whatever, and they'd see the dog. What are you doing here? It's like, oh, I've got a YouTube channel, and so I'm filming some stuff. But it ended up organically coming up in conversation because, like me, my colleagues were also utilizing YouTube and Google, who owns YouTube, to look up certain information. And, as I was a resident, we were looking up videos on doing nerve blocks, videos on this, that, or the other. And so then my videos ended up showing up in my colleagues' search results, and then they would bring it up with me. So at first it was a little embarrassing, but I mean, no one gave me a hard time about it.
Then, because look at you now, haha. Do you have anything to add, Zane?
No, I echo Max's sentiment. Like I made the videos. Most people had no idea that I was as famous as I was until they came across their feeds, and then they were like, "What the heck? You're making TikToks?" And I was like, it's just fun. It's something I do on the side. And then, like Max said, everybody was skeptical or they joked about it in the beginning, but now, it's opened up doors that I could never imagine opening up and given me privileges that I've never thought would even possible as a anesthesiologist. But in the beginning, I echo Max's sentiment exactly. People were like, what is this? Or they would show, Dr. Hassan's on TikTok or on Instagram or whatever. But now it's like, oh, it's Doc Hollywood walking through the door. So it's funny. It's funny up in kind of sway.
That is cool. And, that was going to be one of my next questions is how has this process evolved? Even that evolution of growing amongst your colleagues and the suffrage to the stardom, So just curious. I mean, all of us have really challenging jobs, right? It's no joke. You're a peds cardiac anesthesiologist. That's like serious stuff. And, same with you, trauma, anesthesia, you see some serious challenging cases and jobs. And so how do you find time to juggle this? I feel like I barely have time to even do this hosting of this podcast. Like, how do you guys find time to do this on a regular basis?
Yeah. To follow up on your point before, yes, initially it was most clinicians, whoever came across me would kind of joke about it. Now I get asked all the time, hey, can I be on your podcast? And I said, I'm taking a 6-month break from the podcast, but in 6 months, come back to me. But I think the timing stuff is very tough. If you notice, a lot of my videos are on the way to my car. Once my kid's asleep in the evenings and in my studio, there's not a lot of time for filming, and I just like Max said, I make it a point not to film ever in any situation where there's a patient or anybody that could be identified or anything like that. So I try to find little spaces either before the day starts, like when I'm at the hospital drinking my coffee in my car, or afterwards when I get home, or on the way to my car. I try to fit it in where I can. And I think that's a disadvantage that me and Max have compared to your typical social media influencer that does it 24 hours and has, professional content and days that are set up specifically for filming. And that's where we kind of fall short. And I don't think we have the astronomical numbers you see of like, social media influencers. But in our world, and just like with Brooke and Max, I do my best to kind of fit in where I can the filming and the content.
Yeah. I would echo Zane's sentiment exactly. The nature of my content being longer form, I do have to really chunk out time in order to record. But for me, just balancing my personal life, that means that I'm not recording very often. So I typically will publish one video in a month. It would be unusual to make something more frequent than that. The advantage that I have working in an academic center is that I do have non-clinical time. And so I obviously can't use my non-clinical time to make videos for my personal YouTube channel, or at least I guess I haven't technically had that conversation with my chair, but I don't think that is the intended use of that time. However, as my YouTube channel has grown, I've had some really great opportunities to collaborate with organizations. And right now I'm working with the Anesthesia Patient Safety Foundation. And that is considered scholarly work that falls in the realm of activity that I can do during my non-clinical time. So that makes it a lot easier to sit down and do the research and work with collaborators and then go ahead and do the filming. And that happens for the most part. I do try to film in the hospital because for my type of content, I think that is what ends up being the most engaging. I'm able to pick up a 22 gauge catheter, I'm able to pan over to the cardiopulmonary bypass machine. And that, I think, is how I'm able to draw people in. So it is important for me to do filming at the hospital wherever possible. So I don't quite have the ability as easily to film on the go. I'm not able to make content that's quite as engaging or educational because that's not how I've structured the type of content that I make.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just imagining that you guys probably have some like really fun and even funny stories. So I'm wondering if you can recall any of those unexpected moments that things have happened for you or at you because of this role. Any stories that you can recall to share with the audience?
I had an experience where I was sitting at my desk at home. I got an email at 8 o'clock at night, and it said something about wanting to talk with an anesthesiologist. And at this point, I had gotten a handful of emails like that from medical students, for the most part, who were interested in getting to know more about the field. And I open it up, and it says, "Hi, my name is Carl Penn." Carl Penn, that's the guy who was in Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. And he goes on to describe, he's like, "I am an actor. I am interested in talking with an anesthesiologist about what life is like as a peds cardiac anesthesiologist," which now would make sense, but didn't make sense to me then, because at that point I was a CA2. I had not even matched into peds yet. That hadn't happened. And doing peds cardiac wasn't anything that I had even thought about at that point. And so I ended up connecting with him. And this was still while COVID had things pretty tight in terms of restrictions in hospitals. And he asked me, "Can I come shadow you?" And I was like, "Dude, I really appreciate it. And I'm very flattered. But honestly, you probably ought to talk with someone who's an actual peds cardiac anesthesiologist." And he said, no, it's okay. Like, can we maybe just spend some time together at the hospital? I'm like, sure, let me see if we can do that. But unfortunately, due to COVID, we weren't able to have anyone come in as an outsider. But he did send me a book and some other fun things that he had signed. And I had a really great conversation with him. But I was honest, very honest with him about where I was in my level of training and what he could realistically expect from me. And the funny part is, I think he was looking for a story about how much drama there is and what happens in the world of peds cardiac anesthesia. And I can only speak to the 2 places where I've worked in that capacity, but it was pretty vanilla. There was not a whole lot of drama that happened other than probably the usual clinical drama, but interpersonal drama was not at a level that I would have thought that should become a TV show. And as it turned out, the conversation that we had, he was preparing for a pilot, and I don't think the show ended up getting picked up.
Going anywhere. Maybe you solidified that for him. What about you, Brain? Anything that comes to mind?
I all sorts of stories, at the gym at Equinox, several different celebrities have come up and kind of talked to me about anesthesia, having a surgery. I never thought celebrities would talk, didn't even know who I was. So that's always been cool, getting backstage access to some of their shows and things like that. It was a lot of fun. But I think probably the biggest industry type of thing that it was a great experience for me. It was one of my son's favorite players on a football team messaged me about something differently, and I'd been able to get him to take a picture with my son, and I thought that was extraordinary because he was over the moon and I was over the moon, and so that type of connection would have never happened if I didn't put myself out on social media. But it's just a little interactions for me, not necessarily all the celebrities, but when I go to conferences, I get to meet some of the other social media physician influencers. I mean, you've probably seen them all across your Instagram and TikTok feeds, and they're all fantastic people in real life. And just meeting them and spending the day with them at different conferences, or even the evenings and going out afterwards, and just hearing their stories about, life as a physician, as an influencer, as a nurse and as an influencer, or as a tech and as an influencer. It's eye-opening. They go through the same struggles that I go through in this field that is all brand new, and 3 years ago was completely taboo, but now every hospital, every pharmaceutical company, every society is trying to create their presence, including probably every plastic surgeon is now trying to make a social media channel. And back then it was a brand new field for me and Max. We had no sort of like, again, I would never sell a course or anything like that. I think that is nonsense, but there was no sort of like blueprint for us to go ahead and figure out how to get onto social media or even what to say. And it was so frightening because what if you say the wrong thing? Everybody's going to hate you and cancel you. And so those little interactions and just the bonding that I've made such great friends across the country, from every specialty. And as anesthesiologists, we work with every specialty. So it's easy for us to have conversations with everybody. And those connections to me are the stories that will live on forever in my mind.
Yeah, that's awesome. Obviously, the practice of medicine has influenced you as a social media influencer, but I'm just curious in this new role, wearing this new hat, has that helped influence how you practice medicine? So,
100%. I would say 100%. I was one of the first early adopters of open evidence, and now I'm using the other large language models. And even 6 months ago, when I talked to my colleagues about it, they all said, what is open evidence or what is a large language model? How is it going to help you in your patient day-to-day care? And I demoed it in front of them. And I would have not even brought it to my colleagues had I not known about it from social media. So the impact that first world knowledge. And the reason I know about it is because I went to a conference where they were hosting a giant event and explaining what the technology was. And there was only maybe 50 to 100 physicians, clinicians there. And, there's thousands and thousands across the country. And so in order for the time for that to spread everywhere, that takes a lot of time. And so you have almost a little competitive advantage because a little bit more of the cutting edge technology before the public or even your peers know. So I think it has opened up a lot of avenues in my head for understanding topics and being ahead of the curve. So it's absolutely impacted me.
And what about you, Max?
I have learned so much from the comments that patients have left on my videos that has given me a different perspective of what it's like to be sitting in the pre-op exam area talking with a patient. And so I'll go look at one of my videos and I can sort by the number of comments that have gotten the greatest number of votes. And so I can kind of get a sense of what are the concerns that patients have. What do they respond well to that I've presented in a video? That's something that patients generally would like to see. Recognizing, of course, that everyone's an individual, but the insights that I've gotten just from reading what people have to say in the comment section has helped orient me to what is it that my patient who's sitting in front of me now might be thinking about. And I haven't necessarily brought that up, or they haven't brought that up, but that I have the potential to speak with them in a certain way about how we prevent awareness under anesthesia, which is something that obviously many patients are really concerned about, just as an example. So for me, that's where I've gotten, I think, the most influence from social media onto my clinical practice.
Yeah, I think that, you both are very highly motivated to keep learning and working to improve both in, clinical practice and I'm sure in your social media presence. Is there ever a time that, the comments from like non-medical viewers made you realize that we're doing a poor job explaining something or consent, the consent process, or even that you said, Max, the teaching process? And I think the next thing that comes to mind, have they asked these questions that have kind of forced you to kind of re-look up and relearn some things that, we learned once upon a time in medical school, but, you sort of like focus on where you are? How has it made you a better clinician? Maybe I'll start with you, Max.
Yeah, I think that I have just become especially attuned to some of the issues that really bother patients that I probably wouldn't have heard about if I didn't have the opportunity to look at feedback based on patients' experiences with other healthcare providers, but they could still be relevant to mine. One that comes to mind is just letting patients know when I'm administering midazolam, for example, because I have read a lot of comments where people have described how uncomfortable it was to not know when they were getting a medication that was going to have them stop remembering something. And of course, clinicians give midazolam with obviously the best intent to help patients relax and the anxiolytic property. But if we don't also say, this medication that I'm giving right now is also going to cause you to potentially stop remembering from here on out, that can be an experience that alienates patients from the healthcare system. That is probably the most salient example of my mind of what I have learned from patients.
Yeah, to that point, and I'm going to kick this over to you too, Zane, but I rarely give Versed unless it's like a very anxious person for all those reasons, because the majority of my population either is too frail and elderly or young and healthy, and they just don't want it. They want to be awake as possible, and they want to know what's going on, and they want to be informed. So yeah, I personally have phased out Versed from my personal practice unless that patient really needs it. So that's really interesting to hear you say that. But Zane, I'll kick it back to you as well.
Yeah. I echo your sentiments on Versed. I try to minimize it. Depends, honestly, Brooke and Max, it depends. I've worked on all different parts of the country. I know that also plays into Versed calculations in my head with California sometimes requiring a little bit more because people tend to have a little more resistance out there than in the Midwest. But with your original question, which was initially what kind of comments, I get a wide array, honestly. My content is probably 20 to 30% anesthesia and 70% other things. So I kind of understand the total picture. And, I have shaped my way of trying to minimize the cost to the patient because a lot of the comments I get are about how much everything costs, and I see the impact of it. We see it in the OR, how much waste there is every single day. And anesthesia is such a small component of that, but such a large bill than people see because it's always separated from the cost of the surgery. And they always see this magnificent number next to anesthesia, and they don't recognize that a lot of that is a facility fee, or a lot of that is other extraneous things that we have no control over. But what I do have control over, I try to impact the best that I can. And I wouldn't have really had a grasp or an understanding of how much people fear that bill of anesthesia if I hadn't seen the comments and if I hadn't seen the videos and the replies to my videos and that kind of thing. So absolutely, the comments do impact my day to day, and whether it's in anesthesia or in just regular life, I see them and I read them all the time.
We're looking forward to seeing you both at Anesthesiology 2026 this year. How do you feel about attending as both the clinician and the social media influencer? Dr. Hassan.
I am thrilled, excited. I recently got into going to health conferences that have both technology and medicine blended together. And I have a strong feeling that this year and going forward, ASA is going to become vital to anesthesiologists to kind of understand where the future is going, what kind of technology is coming down the road. Is there going to be predictive analysis built into our anesthesia machines? Are we going to have better understanding of dosages that we don't have to calculate in that exact second? Will there be a machine that kind of helps us understand that? And what kind of impact will we have in our charts? Just understanding the patient, instead of taking the 20 to 25 minutes searching through the chart, looking for an EKG from, 2017 that apparently had something wrong with it, but you can't find it. Now, the power of AI is right here. I mean, it's going to be the next 3 years, as much as all of us clinicians want to kind of deny it, I think it's going to be in every single field and with a lot of force. And if we don't accept it and kind of embrace it and guide it, if we try to fight back on it, I think that's a problem for our field specifically, but that's my own opinion. But I'm excited to be at ASA because I'm excited to not only, like you said, be there as a participant, but as an influencer, because I want to highlight the GE Healthcare, the other companies out there that are integrating artificial intelligence in their full suites, because that's going to be our day-to-day. It's going to make our lives easier, and it's going to make our ability to treat patients much more, I guess better would be the best word, or much more efficient. We're not going to spend so much time wasting time and note-taking and these kind of things that burn all of us out in the specialty. And so I'm excited to highlight that because I think a lot of us need a little bit of good news coming down the pipe, and it's going to be fun.
Dr. Feinstein?
I'm very excited to go to ASA. I go basically every year, and I have since before the pandemic. As a clinician, what I look forward to most is a combination both of just seeing friends and colleagues there every year because it's so well attended, and I get to catch up with people from med school and residency and my current colleagues, and then go see everything that is happening, the latest technology, the latest studies that are being highlighted in the field. And so as far as social media goes, I fortunately am going to have the opportunity to really do a deep dive into ASA this year and highlight some of the lectures and highlight some of the technology that's there. So I'm really looking forward to doing long form content based on what are the emerging trends in the literature and also technology, and putting those on YouTube within a month or so afterward.
Yeah, that's great. And this has been an exciting conversation for me, at least. I feel a little like a fangirl here. So really, thank you so much for joining me with this conversation. It's really been great getting to know you, really learning all the little things about you a little better, especially I'm sure our listeners, but also our anesthesiologists are just learning that this is a space that we need to start molding into. I mean, this is not something that we should be embarrassed about anymore, right? This is something that is teaching our patients. It's helping us grow, helping us to become better educators, better clinicians, all around better anesthesiologists. So personally looking forward to following your work more closely, and I'm sure many of our listeners will be as well. And I want to just thank again Zain Hassan and Max Feinstein for your time. Do you want to give your handles on where followers can find you? I'll pass it back to you guys to close with that.
You can find me just on YouTube, and if you search my name, Max Feinstein, I'm the only one that comes up as far as I'm aware. You might be able to find an account that has my material on TikTok, but if you do, it's not my account.
And for me, guys, you can find me, Dr. Zain Hassan, Google. It'll come up, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and I think one more, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, just search Dr. Zain Hassan. It'll pop up, I promise.
And to our listeners, thank you all, as always, for joining us. We appreciate you, and we hope you'll tune in again soon for more Central Line.
Want to see one of the biggest influencers in medicine today? Viral sensation Dr. Glaucom Flecken, ophthalmologist, cancer survivor, and comedian Will Flannery, MD, is headlining Anesthesiology 2026 this October with a keynote on humor and humanity in medicine. Get ready to laugh, cry, and see healthcare in a whole new light. Learn more about his keynote session and register to join us October 16th to 20th in San Diego at asahq.org/annual meeting. Subscribe to Central Line today, wherever you get your podcasts, or visit asahq.org/podcasts for more.